Vegas will still rise again. Your betrayal won't defeat me.
You hear me? Hello? Hello? Ugh, why is it wet in here? What is this? Someone get me out of here!
Change, 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 change of food. Lord, look down here, see your worried man. Chain of love, oh how they
You know how in most games there are these unspoken rules of what you can and cannot do?
Treated you like family.
You know that you can't shoot Michael in GTA until the game gives you the explicit choice to do so at the very end. You know that you can't do anything to save Jackie's life in Cyberpunk because that's just the way it is.
Oh, sorry.
And you know that in Fallout 4, there is no way to avoid siding with the Minutemen besides completely ignoring them. Once you enter the Museum of Freedom in Concord and speak to Preston Garvey, you are forced to side with them. The only way to become enemies with the Minutemen besides just murdering them is to buy a DLC and become the overboss of Nuka-Cola World. Then, and only then, will the Minutemen become hostile through non-violent means. And the worst part of it all is that Concord is the first place a new player is sent, and they are completely oblivious to the fact that they are inviting this
But I've got another favor to ask.
into their
I've had
hometown.
word from a settlement asking for help.
But on the complete opposite side of the spectrum is New Vegas. Fallout New Vegas. You are a courier who is sent to deliver a mysterious package. And on your journey, you are shot in the head by a strange man in a clean, checkered coat. When you awake, you realize that you have been saved by a man named Dr. Mitchell. He kindly evaluates you, gives you help with what to do next, and even gives you a handgun. And after all of that, you can turn right around and kill him in cold blood. In fact, you can kill anyone. Well, almost anyone.
Hey, I can almost see right down the barrel.
And this just goes to show the vast difference between the two games. But there is something deeper here. If you've played New Vegas, you will probably agree that, yes, it is an amazing game, but why? And more importantly, why are there no more games like New Vegas? My first Fallout game was Fallout 4, and before then, I had never even played an RPG. The vastness of the open world, the illusion of unlimited possibilities. I could do whatever I wanted. I played it religiously for the rest of my Christmas break, and once I went back to school, I would occasionally play it on the weekends. Until I finally finished the game in March. Almost a decade later, I decided to play it again. In my head were hundreds of hours of thrilling memories of grand adventures. But upon my return, I was completely and utterly disappointed. Something felt off. I was bored. That magic that I remember feeling was completely gone. So, after only 2 hours, I closed the game. But there was still a lingering curiosity about a different game in the franchise. One that I had been recommended countless times. I was always put off by the dated graphics and janky-looking gameplay, but after years of persuasion, and yes, I'm ashamed to admit this, I finally played Fallout New Vegas for the first time in 2024. And oh my god, that magic feeling came rushing right back. The freedom of choice and exploration, the palpable impact of the traits you select, the amazing art direction, the endless variety of weapons and playstyles, the impact of every choice you make, and the fact that each and every playthrough could be a completely different story from the last. I just hit every gaming itch that I've had for years.
But to truly understand New Vegas, we need to peel off the rose-colored glasses and travel back to 2010.
Two years ago, Bethesda released their critically acclaimed addition to the Fallout franchise, Fallout 3. They managed to transform a methodical isometric RPG into a thrilling and lively 3D world. For most people, it was revolutionary, with critics and fans alike blown away by the expansive open world. And in just 2 years, Fallout New Vegas dropped, and it was okay. Most people were happy with the release, but it didn't make a generational leap the way that 3 did. In fact, Bethesda even offered Obsidian, the company they outsourced to develop New Vegas, a bonus if they were able to achieve a score of at least 85 on Metacritic. And they missed the goal by 1 point. Many initial complaints were about the unprecedented amount of game-breaking bugs and the seeming lack of content. But as the years went on, and with the release of 4 DLCs, the public perception of New Vegas changed dramatically. One of the biggest upgrades from Fallout 3 to New Vegas was the companions. Most companions in Fallout 3 were just walking backpacks and bullet shields. But in New Vegas, we saw complex, unique storylines and thoughtful interactions with each companion depending on what we were doing and where we are. If you try to activate Archimedes 2 with Arcade Gannon as a companion, this happens.
You activated Archimedes? What the hell are you thinking? Oh, to hell with this! Looks like trouble.
No matter you're standing with him, this action is so abhorrently against his moral code that he instantly turns on you. If you stumble across the Brotherhood of Steel's secret bunker within Hidden Valley and try to contact them, you'll be left with silence on the intercom, likely leading you to believe that this is for a later quest, or even an unfinished part of the game. But if you find Veronica, a member of the Brotherhood, outside of Boulder City and recruit her, she will eventually invite you to the bunker.
Hey, you got a second? I'd like a large atomic shake and a double Brahmin burger. And easy on the agave sauce this time.
We gave you a password, Veronica. It's for your safety.
I know where you live, Ramos. Open up.
Where an entirely new and almost hidden questline and group of characters are revealed. And while this is not the only way to access the bunker, it's an excellent example of how companions are able to create unique interactions with the world around you. These videos are really difficult to make, and I'm trying to reach 1 million subscribers before the end of the year. And that's why I want you to subscribe. You are encouraged to take companions to various locations and interact with them frequently. The game wants you to explore and meet new people. After meeting your first companion, which depending on how you play the game could really be any one of them, the game will show you how interesting they really are by giving you their own special quests, and having them interact with you in unique ways depending on the situation. Even non-human companions like Eddie have an in-depth backstory, with unique and beneficial gameplay mechanics. Whereas in Fallout 4, Dogmeat is just a dog. I mean, you do find out that he was hanging around Nick Valentine and Preston Garvey, but it's so barely touched upon and inconsequential that it doesn't really make any impact on the story. But an even bigger upgrade from 3 to New Vegas was the dialogue. I know everyone and their cousin has complained about Fallout 4's dialogue, and we'll get to that later. However, something that should really be highlighted about New Vegas is how out-of-pocket and hilarious the dialogue can be. Entering Camp McCarran, we can find an NCR soldier named Ten of Spades, who has a stutter.
Hey, my man. Ten of Spades. First recon sharpshooter. At your
We can choose to ignore
service.
it, or...
Hey, no cause for that.
There are hundreds of examples of devious responses that you can choose from with almost every character you meet. Most of these options show how the game perfectly captures that player instinct of just wanting to watch the world burn.
You're right. I should.
You really can play the game and just not give a shit, going around causing as much chaos as possible. But for most people, who aren't complete psychopaths, you have an inherent sense to try to make the wasteland a better place, and you are constantly presented with difficult choices. The problem is, there is never a correct choice. There is uncertainty behind every choice you make, because even if you have good intentions, it could lead to a bad outcome. When you finally meet Benny, the man who shot you at the Tops Casino, you are given the choice to forgive him.
What in the goddamn? You forgive me? After what I done? Baby, are you trying to make me cry? I don't know what to say. Words don't begin. The least I can do is comp you the presidential for as long as you want it. This spirit of forgiveness you're showing me, it's enough to make a player rethink what it means to win. You're 18 karat, baby, all the way.
And if you do, he runs out of the room and sends his guards in to kill you? Turning the other cheek in the wasteland will not always work in your favor. In fact, most times it won't. Good karma can only get you so far. Beyond the actual absurdity of dialogue options, there is usually a nauseating amount of dialogue to go through with each character. So if you're a serious nerd, you can learn about some random Brahmin farmer's backstory on how their brother fought in the Battle of Hoover Dam and ended up marrying a ghoul who went on to join the Crimson Caravan. But while some dialogue may feel unnecessary or irrelevant, almost every character has a relation to another, and the way that you interact with them will have an impact. So getting to know these characters will help you with your decision making. But New Vegas has one more massive edge over the other games in the series.
Well, how's it going there, friends? Are you tired of these pesky tangled wires and flimsy earbuds that fly out with a mere sneeze? Well, worry no more, friend. The Raycon Everyday Earbuds are here to revolutionize your listening experience. With the latest in technological wizardry and a design so comfy, it's as if they were crafted just for your ears. Raycon earbuds fit like a glove, stay put, and offer a sound so rich, your old headphones might just shed a tear. Developed by some of the brightest minds, probably, Raycon earbuds boast an astounding 32-hour battery life and easy-peasy Bluetooth pairing. That means you can enjoy your tunes longer, move about more freely, and listen without a hitch. And here's the best part, folks. These nifty little gadgets are priced at just a fraction of those high-floating brands. So why shell out more when you can be more savvy with your spending? Raycons let me listen to music while working in comfort and style. And the 32-hour battery life and noise canceling means I can continue working my 18-hour shifts without any interruptions. But don't just take our word for it. Give them a whirl today and experience the future of sound. Go to buyraycon.com/BeamBuddy to get 20% off the best-selling everyday earbuds. Terms and conditions apply. Listening to Raycon may lead to uncontrollable head bobbing, a surge in coolness, and an enhanced love for music. Brought to you by Raycon.
Well, we know you're violent.
In Fallout 3 and 4, many of the perks work as direct upgrades to linear abilities. Most of these perks are just math equations that upgrade your damage or health linearly with your level. It's the typical Bethesda scaling. As you become stronger and get better weapons, the enemies also become more spongy. It disincentivizes you from trying to find stronger weapons because they will feel just as strong as your 10mm pistol did at the beginning of the game. And while New Vegas suffers from the same scaling issue, the perks are much more interesting. They don't just add a scaling bonus, but instead they offer exclusive abilities, like being able to fast travel while over-encumbered, having passive health regeneration while irradiated, or being able to repair items with vaguely similar ones. And what gives these perks so much importance is that in the base game, you can only choose 15 out of the 88 available perks. Unlike Fallout 4, where you can literally become an unkillable god with every perk and special ability leveled to the max. This limitation ties into New Vegas' central gameplay theme of actions having consequences. And best of all, adds to the true RPG elements and replayability of the game. After your first time beating the game, you'll likely want to go back and make a character with different abilities. For example, in one playthrough, you could be a lone sniper who hunts wildlife in the wasteland and sleeps under the stars, picking off enemies one by one from a distance in combat. In another, you could play as the lucky idiot who plows his way into the strip to take the casinos for all they're worth, and rises to take power of the wasteland. The build variety is nearly endless, and on top of that, the perks you pick actually affect the outcome of certain scenarios, creating one of the most dynamic and engaging storylines that can branch out differently on each playthrough. The best example of this is how you can spec out your character to align with a specific faction's values. Most of New Vegas' storytelling and gameplay revolves around the factions in the game. There are 3 main factions to pick from, that being the NCR, the de facto governing body of the wasteland, or that's at least what they're trying to achieve through questionable means.
I'm glad you're able to get my people freed, but there's a new problem. I just got orders to take out the Great Khans, hostages or not.
They are one of the only groups who are making an effort to bring back some sense of normalcy, with most of the settlers' opinions of them being extremely divisive. Next, there's Caesar's Legion, or Caesar's Legion, which is a merciless dictatorship that is making a rapid expansion throughout the Mojave while being actively opposed by the NCR. They are known for their questionable working conditions and ruthless pillaging. And last but not least is, well, Mr. House, also known as Robert House, the innovative, egalitarian, libertarian, world-class businessman who has one goal: acquisition of the Platinum chip. He is driven by power and an overwhelming fear of losing it, and he plans to mastermind the various conflicts of the wasteland to his advantage. And he needs your help to be able to pull it off. Did I say Mr. House was the final faction? Well, there is one other main faction you can pick from. That being yourself. Fuck working for anyone else. I want to rule the wasteland. Why am I running around like a little errand boy doing the dirty work for all these assholes? I want complete and utter control. The only person capable of actually fixing things up around here is myself. Okay, I might have gotten a little carried away, but this is my favorite option. And to even begin this route, you have to find this seemingly innocuous Securitron in the closet of Benny's room. Eventually, Benny will clue you in on this with his final words after being captured by Caesar's Legion.
To the city called Vegas. So here's what you do. You go down there and you use the chip to do whatever Mr. House would have wanted you to do. And when you get back to the strip, you find Yes Man. I made it so that cat can't help but be helpful.
Dick.
But the fact that such a major part of the game is hidden in some small closet in a random room goes to show how much detail is hidden behind every corner. Besides the 4 major factions, there are a massive variety of smaller, minor factions with their own backstory, quests, and characters. In fact, New Vegas has 20 more factions than Fallout 4. Wait, the Fallout 4 wiki lists Diamond City Security, Neighborhood Watch, and Piper's Newspapers as factions. In fact, most of the minor factions in Fallout 4 wouldn't even be categorized as factions by New Vegas' standards. These are mainly just hostile groups that are tied to pre-existing quests. This is one of the many issues that players had with Fallout 4, which again ties into its complete lack of freedom. In New Vegas, you had deep, interconnected relationships with each of the factions. The world felt alive and responsive to your actions, whereas in Fallout 4, you were responsive to the game's actions. One of my favorite random encounters in Fallout New Vegas is at the very start of the game. You just woke up in Doc Mitchell's house, you decide the fate of Goodsprings, and now you're free to do whatever you want. You decide to head south, and you eventually stumble into a rather large town. From a distance, everything looks normal. Maybe a little too quiet, but normal. That is, until a disheveled man in ragged clothing suddenly comes sprinting towards you, barely able to contain his excitement.
Yeah! Who won the lottery? I did! Smell that air! Couldn't you just drink it like booze?
He laughs maniacally, celebrating as if he's just been given a second lease on life. And in a way, he has. But something feels off. You press him for details, but he won't give you a straight answer.
What lottery? The lottery! That's what lottery! Are you stupid? Only lottery that matters. Oh my God, smell that air!
He just keeps raving about how lucky he is before running off into the desert. Then you step into Nipton, and the horror begins to unfold. The town is in ruins, buildings are still smoldering from recent fires, the streets are littered with bodies, some freshly executed, others hanging from makeshift crosses, condemned to a slow, agonizing death. And standing in the center of it all is a group of eerily calm, heavily armed men. This is your first real introduction to Caesar's Legion. Until now, you may have only heard whispers of them back in Goodsprings, but this is the moment you truly understand who they are and what they represent.
Don't worry. I won't have you lashed to a cross like the rest of these degenerates. It's useful that you happen by. I want you to witness the fate of the town of Nipton, to memorize every detail. And then, when you move on, I want you to teach everyone you meet the lesson that Caesar's Legion taught here, especially any NCR troops you run across.
Not through a long-winded exposition dump, not through a series of dialogue boxes explaining their ideology, but by witnessing the aftermath of their brutality firsthand. You quickly learn that the man from earlier wasn't celebrating a simple lottery win. He had survived the lottery of life and death. The Legion had stormed into Nipton and decided to use it as an example. They forced the town's citizens to draw lots. Some were executed on the spot. Others were crucified and left to suffer, and a handful were chosen for an even worse fate, being taken as slaves to serve the Legion. Only a lucky few, like the man you met, were allowed to walk free. And if you take the time to comb through the carnage all the way up to the 3rd floor of the town hall and enter the office of the mayor, you'll find a very interesting set of notes from him on his computer, which gives you a very detailed but brief understanding of how things came to be in Nipton. The mayor was turning the town into what could simply be described as a brothel, using a pair of attractive girls, Rosie and Sylvia, to bring in business, selling them and whatever else he could to both the Powder Gangers and the NCR. He described how the NCR would only come at night, and the Powder Gangers at day. This was pertinent to keep the groups separated at all costs, considering their animosity towards each other, while still being able to garner business from both groups. But then one day, he was approached by a man simply named Mr. Fox, who presented himself as a representative of the Legion, and offered him 8,000 caps to set up both the NCR and the Powder Gangers, so that they could be scooped up by the Legion. And that's what caused all this horror to unfold. And this moment is Fallout New Vegas at its best. Rather than spoon-feeding you information through cutscenes or exhausting monologues, the game lets you experience the world. It doesn't just tell you that the Legion is a brutal militaristic force, it shows you, and you get to piece the story together yourself. New Vegas insists on giving the player respect to their intelligence, prioritizing good storytelling over accessibility. This method of storytelling, environmental exposition, is what makes New Vegas feel so immersive. Every place you visit has a story to tell. You are trusted to be observant, to explore, and to put the pieces together. Nipton isn't just an introduction to the Legion. It's an introduction to the way New Vegas tells its stories. And it's one of the best examples of how video games as an interactive medium can make storytelling so much more engaging than other art forms if done right. Between 2010 and 2015, there was a major shift in Fallout's art direction, and a prime example would be the guns.
Now you have to ask yourself one question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do ya, punks?
You see, most of the guns in Fallout New Vegas were grounded in reality. There's plenty of awesome guns like the service rifle, the assault carbine, the marksman's carbine, and my personal favorite, the survivalist rifle. All of these rifles are modeled after the ever so popular and all-American AR-15 platform. It's a gun deeply ingrained into American culture, so it's obligatory to include. There's also the glorious .45 auto pistol, based on the 1911, and the 9mm pistol, based on the Browning High Power, both of which are creations of the legendary gun messiah, John Moses Browning. There's several more Browning guns in there, like the Winchester 1887 lever-action shotgun, the Winchester 1892 lever-action rifle, and the 1918 Browning automatic rifle. There's even more American classics, like the Colt single-action Army, the Thompson submachine gun, and the M1 Garand. And of course, we can't forget about the fan favorites, the .45-70 hunting revolver, based on the Magnum BFR, the Riot shotgun, which is a modified Remington 1100, and the .50 caliber anti-material rifle, a direct recreation of the PGM Heket 2. All of these guns are such a vibe, they fit the setting and the aesthetic perfectly. There's still some goofy looking guns like the 12-7 pistol and SMG, but those are outliers. The classic games have some weird guns too. Fallout has always had weird guns in it, but for the most part, the guns are gritty, cool, and at least semi-realistic. You can tell that the developers working on New Vegas were into guns, and they did the best they could with the time constraints and technological limitations. But as for the guns in Fallout 4, it's the opposite. Most of the guns are just plain silly and can't be taken seriously. It seems like the developers here haven't so much as touched a gun in real life, so they have no appreciation for the art form that is gun design. There's still some realistic guns, like the .44 revolver, the hunting rifle, and the handmade rifle, but that's about it. Across the board, Fallout 4 left out all the cool guns from New Vegas and opted for more cartoonish-looking alternatives. Even for the few guns that stayed, they were altered into goofy-looking abominations. For example, let's compare the 10mm pistol from Fallout 3 in New Vegas to the 10mm pistol from Fallout 4. The 10mm from Fallout 3 in New Vegas is basically a combination of the Mark 23 and the Desert Eagle, both of which are very iconic and badass firearms. So this gun looks mean and intimidating, like it means business. It's not a perfect design though, it's a little bit oversized, and the outdated graphics ain't helping its case either. But if you look at a modern recreation made by the Fallout 4 New Vegas mod team, then you can see the 10mm in its full glory. It looks freaking awesome. While this gun may be fictional, it feels like it could be a real, functional firearm. The Fallout 4 10mm pistol, on the other hand, just looks like a bloated and bubbly Nerf gun. They increased the overall size even more, and rounded out all the sharp edges and sleek angles, which makes it feel like a cringe foam LARP toy. The .45 SMG was treated the same way. In Fallout New Vegas, it was a near-perfect replica of the Thompson submachine gun. They just forgot to flip up the rear sight, which is kind of a funny oversight, but other than that, it's a good-looking Tommy gun. Meanwhile, the Fallout 4 SMG looks like an off-brand Tommy gun. Everything's just slightly off, so it falls into the uncanny valley of gun design. The proportions are weird, the details are wrong, the bolt's on the wrong side, and all around it has a cartoonish and unserious look to it. Another similar thing happened with the automatic rifle. In New Vegas, we had a mostly faithful recreation of the BAR. A few things are off, but it's still pretty close. Meanwhile, in Fallout 4, we have the combat rifle, which again, looks like a cartoonish knockoff. It's like it's trying to be a BAR, but it completely misses the mark. It looks like something that a kindergartner would draw. It's even weirder when you consider that the receiver and the stock are directly based on the Soviet PPSH, so it's like some weird crossbreed. And oh boy, don't even get me started on that dang Fallout 4 assault rifle. This bloated mass of scrap metal is closer to resembling the Prydwen airship than it is to an actual assault rifle. Now compare that assault rifle to the assault rifles from New Vegas, or even the assault rifle from Fallout 3. These are real guns, and they're freaking cool. They have so much style and charm. But the Fallout 4 assault rifle is a bunch of random machine guns fused together, like an FEV experiment gone wrong. In a vacuum, I suppose Fallout 4's guns aren't too bad. Weird and nonsensical guns are okay, if it's consistent with the art style of the franchise. Like nobody is upset over the guns in Borderlands or Team Fortress, because those games have always had a cartoonish art style. The problem in Fallout is that we went from mostly realistic or semi-realistic depictions to whatever the fuck this shit is. It's pretty interesting how big of an issue it is. It's so huge that tons of players download mods to replace the guns in Fallout 4 with realistic alternatives. There are some of the most downloaded mods out there, because we just want cool guns, damn it.
And 4's weapons look like this for a reason. The rest of 4's entire world has been smoothed out. Every corner has been rounded. Everything feels softer, from vehicles to the TVs to even the Deathclaws. New Vegas' Deathclaws had these uncannily large fingers, with a jaunting underbite and jagged teeth pointing towards their eyes, whereas the Deathclaws in 4 look significantly less intimidating. They're even much slower, more like a bull with scales than an irradiated monstrosity of unconscientious horrors. Wow. 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 I got flattened, like, hard. Even with the grenade machine gun. Wait, is that a dead Deathclaw? What the fuck? Where's it sleeping? Wait a minute, what? It's dead. Is it dead? It's dead. How did it die? Keep in mind, most of these examples apply to Fallout 3 as well, considering nearly all of the assets are shared between itself and New Vegas. The thing is, Fallout 4 seriously detracted from the grittiness and grounded approach from the previous entries. Fallout 3 and New Vegas at least felt like they could have been an alternate history in our reality, but 4 begins to stray away from that suspension of disbelief found in the older titles. A really interesting parallel is how from 2010 to 2015, a lot of web designers and user interfaces began to change drastically. Sites like YouTube went from these super customizable and wacky landscapes to dull, simplified carbon copies. Websites used to have identity, and now they all have been homogenized using the same UI principles. You used to be able to set your own custom background for your channel and add so much personalization. And now every single site gives you the same thing: a profile picture and a banner. That's it, if you're lucky. Not only have these sites lost their identity, but the users themselves have also lost the ability to express their own identity. And this same pattern can be seen between Fallout New Vegas and 4. Choices have become limited, systems oversimplified, and identity lost.
Who are on the road must have a code that you can.
New Vegas finds a perfect balance between Wild West whimsy and the horrific, grounded realities of nuclear Armageddon. You could see the attempts of civilization trying to rebuild itself, the desperation of the people who live in this world. But there's also moments like this. Fallout 4 seemed to have an identity crisis, with 1, 2, and New Vegas being set on the West Coast, and Fallout 4 having to expand on 3's relatively limited exploration of the East Coast lore and world building. Bethesda seemed unsure where to take the franchise. Canonically, the East Coast was devastated to a much larger degree than the West, and on top of that, the experiments that Vault-Tec were running were much more experimental than those from the vaults in the West.
The Overseer has been implanting these murderous intentions in the entire vault population without my knowledge. Using the loudspeakers in the dorms instead of just the studios. He subjected everyone to the white noise as they slept. He then implanted combat suggestions he claims came from Vault-Tec itself. He must be completely insane. No observation, no controls. I'm going to have to confront him now.
But in Fallout 4, the world almost feels too alive, too civilized. Fallout 4 should have felt more like Stalker than Borderlands. 4 traded New Vegas' survival and RPG mechanics for base building and gunplay.
And sure, Fallout 4's overall gameplay may feel newer and smoother than its predecessors, but that's to be expected. It's a newer game after all. Other than the surface-level polish, Fallout 4's gunplay actually regressed in many ways. They ripped out core features from previous games, and they couldn't even get the basics right. For example, when you reload a lever-action rifle in Fallout 4, you always reload 5 rounds, even if you only shot 1 bullet. Obviously, that doesn't make any sense, and you don't need to be a gun expert to understand that. You just need a functioning brain and the ability to count. Not only is this grossly unimmersive, but it's also detrimental to the gameplay. The lack of a proper reload system means that the lever action will always have a super long reload, which hinders the gun's performance. Meanwhile, in New Vegas, if you shoot a lever action 1 time, you reload just 1 bullet. You shoot it twice, you reload 2 bullets. It's freaking amazing. Mind you, Obsidian had to craft up this mechanic with the ragtag Gamebryo engine, all under strict time constraints too, so it's quite a feat. Bethesda could have easily implemented this mechanic into Fallout 4, but either through negligence or sheer incompetence, they just didn't. New Vegas also had various ammunition types to add more depth to the gunplay. Armor could completely negate damage if it was lower than a certain threshold, so if you try to use a low caliber round against heavy armor or a robot, it's not gonna do much. For these enemies, you have to use armor penetrating rounds to punch through that armor. But if you're dealing with a fleshy, unarmored enemy, you can load your gun with hollow points for more raw damage. And of course, there's the epic 50 caliber high explosive rounds for when you need to deal with a whole pack of Deathclaws. It's really expensive, but man, does it pack a punch. There's a boatload of variety to the shotgun loads especially. There's typical buckshot, slug rounds, flechettes, magnum loads, dragon's breath, even coin shot and beanbag loads. Each shotgun load plays differently, they have their own niche. But in Fallout 4, all you get is standard buckshot. That's it, you don't even have the option for slugs. There's no variety to the ammunition at all, everything is just standard ammunition. Well, kinda. You can get guns with armor penetrating rounds, or even explosive rounds, but it's not a different ammunition type. It's treated as an upgrade to the gun itself. Like, in order to get armor penetration, you don't load the gun with armor penetrating rounds. Instead, you have to bring the gun to a workbench and upgrade the receiver to an armor penetrating receiver. But that's not how guns work. A gun's receiver doesn't magically transform the bullet into an armor penetrating round. You gotta load in armor-piercing rounds in the first place. Getting explosive rounds is even stupider. There's no craftable upgrade for it. Instead, you have to grind for hours in hopes that you get a legendary drop with the explosive trait. And once you get one, you now have the most broken gun in the entire game, all for no added cost. Each explosive round in New Vegas came at a cost. You had to scrounge up or pay for every bullet, and once you ran out, you ran out. But in Fallout 4, once you get that legendary explosive upgrade, you're set for life, because you can keep buying cheap regular bullets and still get explosive performance. It's all part of Bethesda's philosophy to dumb down the gameplay. They don't want you to think or have to learn how guns work. They just want you to mindlessly run around and shoot things in a shooting gallery. But in New Vegas, you're treated like an adult. You're expected to figure things out and understand how they work. Like if you're a gun nut, you would understand that you can load 38 Special into any gun chambered in 357. And guess what? You can do exactly that in New Vegas. 38 Special does less damage, but it's cheaper than 357, so it can be worth it if you're just trying to take out low-level geckos or mole rats. There's surplus rounds for rifles too. If you're on a budget and can't afford the high-quality stuff, you can buy surplus rounds to get a lot more bullets for the same price. The trade-off is that the ammunition is dirty and corrosive, so it'll wear away that durability stat much quicker than standard rounds. That's another major thing Fallout 4 left out entirely: weapon durability and jamming. You see, guns in real life don't always work flawlessly. Just like anything else mechanical, they require regular care and maintenance. If the gun gets too dirty or gunked up, it may fail to load or extract ammunition properly, thus causing a jam. New Vegas implements this by giving each weapon a durability stat. Each shot will slowly decrease the durability, and the lower it gets, the higher chance you have of getting a jam. When that happens, you can't shoot until your character clears the jam, and it's done via a cool and unique animation. To repair your gun, you need to invest in the repair skill and use parts from a donor gun, or pay a hefty price at a repairman. At low levels especially, most of the guns you come across will already be worn down heavily, so they'll jam quite often. It can be frustrating to deal with, and it'll probably get you killed a few times, but that's the point. This is supposed to be a harsh post-apocalyptic world. These guns aren't going to be in tip-top shape. They're beaten to hell just like everything else. You need to level up and progress through the game to get to the good stuff, and when you finally earn that clean gun that functions flawlessly, it feels so sweet. So this isn't some random mechanic thrown in there to make the player suffer for no reason. It's there because it fits the world that it takes place in. The weapon durability and jamming really adds that extra layer of depth and immersion to the gunplay. Without it, the guns feel too safe, too sanitized. It doesn't feel like you're in a dangerous and dirty wasteland. It feels like shooting those plastic guns at the arcade.
Now, I'm sure at this point you're thinking this video is a dunk fest on Fallout 4. And it is, to a degree. But standalone, Fallout 4 is a great game. It introduced so many people, including myself, to the franchise. The game is genuinely fun, which can't be said for so many modern games. The companions are lovable and well written, the environments are gorgeous, and there are so many small details that just weren't possible to put into the previous entries. But when you look at it under the scope of the entire Fallout franchise, it just doesn't fit in. Fallout 4's biggest flaw isn't that it's a bad game, it's that it's a bad Fallout game. It felt like a divergence from what made the series special in the first place. Bethesda, intentionally or not, streamlined and simplified the RPG mechanics to appeal to a broader audience. The deep, intricate role-playing elements that defined Fallout 1, 2, and New Vegas were exchanged for a more action-oriented experience. And while that shift made Fallout 4 more accessible, it came at the cost of the franchise's identity. One of the most egregious examples of this was the dialogue system. In New Vegas, the player character wasn't fully voiced, which gave you the freedom to project your own personality onto them. The dialogue choices were robust, filled with skill checks, unique responses, and varying tones. You had full control over who you wanted to be. Then, Fallout 4 gave us the dialogue wheel.
Good morning.
Every conversation boiled down to 4 options. Yes, sarcastic yes, no, and question before saying yes. The nuance of previous games was stripped away, leaving behind an RPG system that barely even qualified as role-playing. You weren't role-playing a character, you were just selecting how politely you wanted to say yes to an NPC. Gone were the complex speech checks that rewarded investment in non-combat skills. Gone were the intricate dialogue trees that made each conversation feel meaningful. It was all dumbed down into a system that at best functioned like a Mass Effect knockoff and, at worst, made every player feel like the same person, no matter what choices they made. And this was all in service of a fully voiced protagonist. Now, I don't inherently have an issue with voice protagonists in RPGs. Mass Effect, The Witcher, and even Cyberpunk have all done it well. But Fallout has always been about choice, and when you lock the player into a specific voice with a specific backstory, a loving spouse, a happy pre-war life, a missing son, you limit that choice. New Vegas lets you be anything, do anything. You could be a sleazy casino rat, a hard-nosed bounty hunter, a crazed chem addict, or even a pacifist diplomat. But Fallout 4 forces you to be a parent on a quest to find their son. It removes the blank slate, and in doing so, it restricts the role-playing in a series that was built on it. Even the storytelling in Fallout 4 felt different. Bethesda has always excelled at world-building through environmental storytelling, and Fallout 4 is no exception. The scattered notes, terminal entries, and random skeleton placements all do a fantastic job of painting a picture of the world before and after the bombs fell. But what about the main story? It's a rehash of Fallout 3, with a few twists to make it feel new. Instead of finding your dad, you're finding your son. Instead of choosing between the Enclave and the Brotherhood, you're choosing between the Institute, the Brotherhood, the Minutemen, or the Railroad. The structure is painfully similar, but 4 lacks the emotional weight that 3 had. And that's because the mystery isn't compelling. The moment you witness Baby Sean being taken from the cryopod, you know there's going to be a time skip. The second you see the Institute's tech, you know they're going to be involved in some capacity. The big twist? Sean is the leader of the Institute, and this feels more like a forced plot device than a shocking revelation. In New Vegas, your journey was about piecing together what happened to you. Who shot you? Why? What factions are vying for power in the Mojave? And where do you fit into the chaos? It was a story of revenge, politics, and survival, shaped entirely by the player's choices. Fallout 4's story, on the other hand, is about the Institute, not the player. You're just along for the ride, forced into a personal stake that you might not even care about. Again, none of this is to say that Fallout 4 is bad. It's just different. And honestly, if it had been a new IP instead of a Fallout game, it probably would have been remembered more fondly. There's no denying that Fallout 4's world is fun to explore and that its combat is relatively improved over the previous entries, and its companion system is one of Bethesda's best. Again, some of my fondest gaming memories are in Fallout 4, but looking back on it now, I can only see what it could have been. Obviously, there are limitations when it comes to scope, but there was a decision made from Bethesda at the very start, long before any code or assets were even created, that shaped what kind of game Fallout 4 would be. But this is all part of a larger trend in gaming, one where accessibility and mass market appeal take priority over depth and complexity. Fallout 4 wasn't made to be a hardcore RPG, it was made to be an open world action game with light RPG elements. And for a lot of people, including myself, that was awesome. But for longtime fans of the series, it was a turning point, a signal that Bethesda was no longer making Fallout for them. And in a way, that's why Fallout 76 was inevitable. Fallout 4 proved that Bethesda was willing to push the franchise in a more mainstream, multiplayer-friendly direction. The next step was to strip out all the RPG elements even further and turn Fallout into a live service experience. And well, we all saw how well that went. The good news? Fallout as a franchise is bigger than Bethesda. New Vegas proved that another studio could take the series in a bold new direction while still respecting its roots. And with Microsoft's acquisition of Bethesda, the idea of another Obsidian-made Fallout isn't completely out of the question. Fallout 4 wasn't the end of Fallout. It was just a weird detour. A fun and entertaining, but ultimately misplaced detour in a series that deserves better. But hey, at least the power armor was cool. There are plenty of ways to tell a story in a video game, but not all of them are created equally. Some games rely on exposition dumps, forcing players to sit through long-winded explanations about the world and its conflicts. Others favor cinematic storytelling, treating the player like an audience rather than an active participant. And then there are games like New Vegas, which take a much more natural approach, where the story unfolds around you, shaped by your choices, your discoveries, and most importantly, your actions. Storytelling in New Vegas is a testament to the idea that video games are an interactive medium first and foremost. Instead of trying to force-feed you information, it gives you the pieces and lets you put them together yourself. This approach not only makes the world feel richer, but it also makes the player feel like they're uncovering something real, rather than just playing through a script. And not all games can achieve this level of mastery. Some fumble their storytelling by limiting player agency, others by failing to make the world feel alive. And in some cases, the narrative actively contradicts the gameplay, creating an experience that feels disjointed and hollow. What makes New Vegas special is that it doesn't treat the player like an outsider being guided through a theme park. It treats them like someone who belongs in the world. This is achieved through three key elements: player choice, environmental storytelling, and narrative reactivity. First, let's talk about choice. A great RPG doesn't just give players dialogue options, it gives them real power over how the story unfolds. In New Vegas, you're not just making decisions about which faction to side with, you're making choices that determine the fate of entire towns, people, and economies. Do you side with the NCR, hoping to restore order to the Mojave, even if it means submitting to bureaucratic control? Do you throw your lot in with Mr. House, betting on a vision of progress that leaves no room for weakness? Or do you support Caesar's Legion, embracing the brutality of the wasteland in name of order and discipline? These aren't simple good or evil choices. Every option comes with trade-offs, and every path has consequences. There's no golden ending where everyone lives happily ever after. The world is messy, and the game trusts you to navigate that mess on your own terms. But choice alone isn't enough. To make a world really feel alive, you also need to tell the story through its environment. The Mojave is littered with details that hint at a larger world beyond the immediate conflict. Abandoned buildings contain skeletons frozen in their last desperate moments. A broken-down caravan with a single set of tracks leading away suggests betrayal. A half-written letter left on a corpse tells of a journey cut short. You can ignore these details and still enjoy the game, but for players who take the time to explore, every location has something to say. Vaults, in particular, are some of the best examples of New Vegas' environmental storytelling. Vault 11, for example, is seemingly abandoned when you first arrive. But as you dig deeper, reading terminal entries and listening to old audio logs, the story of what happened there begins to unfold.
Wait. People should know what happened. They could learn from it. If there's anyone out there at all, I hope they never have to find out. Ready, Harry? Yeah. No, wait!
You quickly learn that the Vault's dwellers were forced to sacrifice one of their own every year, believing that it was the only way to keep the Vault operational.
Congratulations, Martyr. Your fantastic journey is only just beginning. Please proceed to the light. The light is calming and puts your mind at ease. Go to the light. Please sit in the chair. The show is about to begin. Let a great life. Living it has been its own reward. But it is only the beginning. Close your eyes now, and imagine what joys await you in the next life, the afterlife. Can you see them? Good.
When they finally decided to refuse, expecting punishment from their unseen overlords, nothing happened. They had been killing each other for nothing. The Vault's twisted social experiment had broken them, leaving behind only a grim message for anyone who might stumble upon it in the future.
Congratulations, citizens of Vault 11. You have made the decision not to sacrifice one of your own. You can walk with your head held high, knowing that your commitment to human life is a shining example to us all.
But worst of all was Vault 19. Vault 19 implemented a paranoia-inducing experiment by segregating its inhabitants into two groups, Red Sector and Blue Sector, and they intentionally limited interaction between them. Each sector had its own overseer, and the overseers of each side would try to induce said paranoia by flashing lights, fiddling with the ventilation, and playing strange, high-pitched noises. Now, these may seem like very insignificant things, and that was the exact point. Vault-Tec was trying to see how little could be done to create paranoia between two groups, which isn't very unsimilar from the CIA's Project Artichoke, a series of tests that began in 1951 where subjects were exposed to high-frequency noise, flashing lights, and sleep deprivation. This was to see if paranoia could make subjects more susceptible to control and manipulation.
Don't have to.
There's something that I'm sure all of us experienced when playing New Vegas for the first time. Something hard to put into words. When you leave Goodsprings and begin exploring with an empty map, you slowly begin to understand the true scale of the game. You'll walk for 10 minutes south and realize you've only scaled a small portion of it. And when every single location you visit is full of so many characters with their own personal conflicts within themselves and their communities, you're immediately latched onto by this world. My first time in Primm was the moment I fell in love with the game. You find a courier post, which you think may have some useful information on what has happened to you, and you ask around town for info on Benny, and yourself. You're given crumbs of information, but it's just enough to engage you even more and fuel your desire for solving this mystery. You can help the town find a new sheriff, figure out why the NCR is camped just outside, and walk on the roller coaster. All of this and even more to do in just one small place in a very big world. But the most interesting part of it all is the gun missing from the display case in front of Vicky and Vance's, Bonnie and Clyde's, car. It's something that only a keen eye may notice. But if you do, you can start to look into it. You can ask around, and Johnson Nash will tell you it's stolen. Not much info. But on your travels, you may just find it by surprise. These kind of connections are sprinkled all throughout New Vegas. And by just looking around and appreciating the detail, you'll begin to discover so many hidden parts of the game naturally. New Vegas is one of those games where 100%ing it isn't an absolutely mind-numbing grind fest. If you play through the main storyline without much thought, it's easy to pass off the game as boring. Like, think about it. It's almost too easy for a first-time player to rush their way to the big glowing city they see out in the distance, realize they're too damn broke to be let in, look up some YouTube tutorial which shows them how to get a passport from Mick and Ralph's, waltz into the tops and shoot Benny on the spot with a single-shot shotgun they found on a dead powder ganger, take the platinum chip, get told that Mr. House is looking to speak with them, hand it over to the guy because, well, wasn't that the whole point of all this anyway? And bam, do a couple more errands for him and head over to Hoover Dam and finish the game. That's not much of an experience or story. Sure, the Cazadores and Deathclaws may dissuade a player from rushing to the strip too early, but if they're as stubborn as I am, it's easily cheesable with quick saves. This is one of the times where New Vegas' overwhelming dedication to freedom of choice can be a bad thing. And while the scenario I made up is pretty unlikely and a bit hyperbolic, New Vegas never really does anything to slow you down. And taking things slow is the best way to take things in the Mojave. This is far superior to the alternative of putting a big pile of rocks or a locked gate at the halfway point of the map to stop players from going too far before experiencing whatever the developers decided was enough of that area before letting them move on. But there must have been another way to push players a little more in the right direction. And if you're bad at listening like me, some of the dialogue can be hard to follow. And I'm not crediting this as a fault of New Vegas, but rather my own. The amount of information you're presented with in New Vegas can be overwhelming at times. And trying to micromanage 7 different quest lines and make sure that you're not destroying your relationship with a faction by doing or not doing a quest can be quite stressful. And this whole thing gets much worse if you decide to take a break from the game for, let's say, a week, and you hop back on in the middle of something completely chaotic, and you're trying to figure out what the hell is going on and what the hell you were doing from what might as well be someone spitting on a napkin as a form of record keeping. My brain just isn't wired for that kind of memorization and figuring out complex interconnected storylines. I'm better at smashing a bunch of polygons together and calling it art. Maybe I'm just dumb, but this was one of the things in New Vegas that made me not want to play it at times. I just wanted to go on adventures and explore, but at about the halfway point of the game, it felt more like a game of Crusader Kings 3 than an action RPG. And this is where I made the unfortunate mistake of trying to skip some quest lines and branching stories to get to the meat and potatoes of the game. I missed out on some of the best things the game had to offer because it was all too much at one point. I've already insinuated that there is no wrong way to play the game, and that's kind of the magic of it, but I think somehow I found a way to play it wrong. After beating the game for the first time, I began to talk with some of my friends who were longtime fans of the game and who were also the ones who convinced me to play it. When they were asking me about my experience, they questioned me about things I had no idea even existed, telling me I could have gotten a giant space laser, and that the remote for it is some broken-looking toy gun that kids in Freeside were playing with, and that there's a quest where you have to expose a secret cannibal cabal and save the victim's life, or that you can repair the brain of a cybernetic dog and he can be your companion. I felt like I'd played a completely different game. All of this is to say that it's entirely possible that many of the people who tried New Vegas never got to understand what made it so compelling, and why many of the people coming from the action-packed Fallout 3 may not have enjoyed New Vegas on release. Almost everyone agrees that New Vegas is a great game, and I'm certainly not receiving any awards for originality by saying it is. When was the last time an RPG has been held to such a high regard? Okay, yes, I know, I'll get to that later, but for now my question is, behind the scenes, What made Fallout New Vegas such an outstanding game? In 2009, Bethesda approached Obsidian with a simple idea: make a new Fallout game with their relatively new engine that was used for Fallout 3. And at the time, Obsidian was in the middle of working on another RPG, Sega's Alpha Protocol. And somehow, they were up for the challenge of developing both RPGs concurrently. And part of Bethesda's agreement with Obsidian was that they would only have 18 months to finish the project. Obsidian CEO Fergus Urquhart insisted that they take on the challenge because I've got 200 people and they've all got to be paid. That changes your whole mindset. That means there's always a gun to your head. Not only did they have an insanely small window of time to produce such an in-depth game, but they were also working on another RPG. Obsidian split their development team between both games, and somehow managed to produce one of the most highly regarded games of all time. So, what was it that contributed to their masterpiece? Many of Obsidian's key developers, including Chris Avellone, Josh Sawyer, and Fergus Urquhart, had previously worked at Black Isle Studios, the division of Interplay that created the original Fallout games. Given their experience and deep connection with the franchise, they were the best picks for the job. Josh Sawyer specifically was the one who pushed for more traditional RPG elements. He introduced the hardcore option to the game, which added things like ammo weight, dehydration, and hunger, which gave players the choice to have a completely different experience, one more focused on survival. And more importantly, he wanted the factions to be morally gray. The NCR had good intentions, but they had questionable methods. The Legion was brutal and authoritarian, but offered stability and order to the wasteland. He insisted that there would never be an easy, correct choice to make. Having a director with such a clear vision for what they want their game to be is so essential to creating something great. Just like with movies. When you have too many creative inputs for a single end goal, the results become diluted. Andy Muschietti directed both the screen adaptation of Stephen King's It and The Flash. Yes, both of these movies were directed by the same man. It had a budget of $35 million and grossed nearly $1 billion globally, whereas The Flash was rumored to have a budget between $200 and $300 million, and only grossed $271 worldwide. It was a complete box office flop. Not only was it a financial failure, but both critics and audiences alike rated it significantly lower than Muschietti's previous films. One of The Flash's largest critiques were its lackluster visual effects. Like, okay, how bad could they really be, right? Oh, wow. What caused this? They must have cheaped out on the VFX studio, right? Let's see who did the VFX for The Flash. DNEG. Wow, these guys must really suck. Oh. Okay. So, how does this happen? How can the same company be responsible for arguably both some of the best and some of the worst VFX seen in recent years? Well, I'll let Zach Mulligan, one of the people who worked on The Flash, explain.
You thought The Flash had bad CGI? I can tell you why, because I worked on the movie. In the past couple of years, it seems like there's been an increase in the amount of complaints about bad CGI in superhero movies. I have 2,000 shots that I need for this sequence, and the VFX studios will place a bid based on that quantity of shots. But here's the catch. The amount of work per shot varies dramatically, so one shot could have a wire removal, another shot could have wire removal, smoke sim, fire sim, face replacement, green screen. In fact, I had to be the one to call artists on a Friday night to say, hey, can you work over the weekend? Which is part of the reason why I left after 3 months. Let me fill you in on a little secret. Movie studios don't care about good CGI. They just don't. So if it looks like a VFX shot in The Flash was made in a week, it's probably because it was.
Okay, but we're talking about video games, not movies, right? Bit of a strange coincidence there, isn't it? Ultimately, as Zach said, these companies answer to the shareholders, who just happen to be the same across both the movie and video game industry. And when the shareholders put profit over art, this is what we get. Overworked artists, loot boxes, battle passes, endless sequels, 10 times the detail, subscription services, superhero and animation slop. It goes on and it gets worse and worse, and now AI is getting into the mix. But it isn't all bad. Video games have always been about money. From the Atari to arcades to the Xbox 360, it's been profit-driven from the very start. So, have CEOs and investors just gotten exponentially more greedy over the last 40 years? Well, maybe, but I'm not satisfied with that answer. I find it hard to believe that somehow just 4 decades ago, executives were just okay with not maximizing their profits to such a cutthroat degree. And now, somehow they are. The SNES launched in 1991 at a price of $180, which is $524 in today's money. About the same price as a PS5 or whatever the latest Xbox's name is. But the games were still $60, which is $175 in today's money. Imagine paying nearly $200 to play this. Obviously, this is a dumb comparison to make because the standard was much lower in terms of scope and fidelity in the 90s, so let me give you another example. Imagine paying nearly $200 to play this today. The price hasn't budged in nearly 40 years for most games, although recently we have seen some games start to creep up to $70. But nowadays, the real moneymaker isn't in the price of the game or the console, but rather microtransactions. Hell, the most popular and profitable game in the world right now is free. At this point, most of us are aware of this, yet we still all are a part of it. I myself am guilty of buying that shiny new skin on Hunt Showdown every now and then. And the thing is, battle passes and loot boxes won't go away until people stop buying them. And I don't see that happening anytime soon. Helldivers 2 is one of those shining examples in modern gaming. Yes, it has battle passes, but you can always go back and buy them at any time. There's no FOMO. And you can even use the currency used for buying said battle passes in-game, although it'll probably take a lot of grinding. The point is, it's not all bad. And in many ways, it's a lot better. Gaming is more accessible than ever, with handhelds that are 5 times more powerful than consoles from 10 years ago. And digital storefronts like Steam make games easier and cheaper to get than ever. And not to mention the accessibility and insane variety of indie and AA titles, we're completely spoiled. Yet at the same time, the AAA market is lacking. Severely. The most beloved and played games are from 10 to 15 years ago. In fact, the most played games on Steam have an average age of 8 years. That's the average. So a significant portion of gamers are playing games that are even older than 8 years. Additionally, only 15% of Steam users' time was spent playing games that were released in 2024. So a massive portion of the gaming community would still rather play old, fun games over most of what is coming out today. Some may argue that this is just a case of gamers' nostalgia, and to a degree, it is. But recent games like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 really go to show that great RPGs and games in general are still possible. When you have a dedicated and passionate dev team who is given the proper time to make their game, you get something magical. Video games as a whole are an art form, and a relatively new one at that, but they are also the combination of almost every art form there is. Writing, sculpting, acting, painting, drawing, music, film, and so much more. It is the antithesis of art and technology. And over the years, these artists have mastered their craft. In 1993, id Software released Doom, and almost 30 years later, they released, Doom. The progression of this art form in such a small period of time is almost unbelievable. But we seem to have reached a plateau, at least technologically. A game that came out 7 years ago arguably still has some of the best graphics and level of detail in any game up to this point. Sure, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is starting to push that envelope slightly in terms of making a truly lively world, but these two games are being compared to each other. That's like comparing Half-Life to Super Mario 3 in 1998. Look how much gaming progressed in those 7 years between 91 and 98. And now we're just getting slightly better AI upscaling. Again, gamers love to complain, and many are impossible to satisfy, myself included, but no matter how nostalgia-infested our brains may be, it's still a fact that something is happening in the industry. Moore's Law states the number of integrated transistors in an integrated circuit doubles every 2 years. Or in layman's terms, theoretically, every 2 years computers should become twice as powerful while remaining the same size. This theory was proposed by Gordon Moore in 1975, and it was very accurate until about 2010. In fact, in September of 2022, NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang considered Moore's Law dead. And it is. The shiny new 5090 is only about 30% better than the 4090, which is significant. But, also uses 30% more power, so it's just increasing its performance linearly with the 4090 by drawing more power. Obviously, this is a technical limitation, and that's okay. Most gamers aren't asking for better graphics. Most gamers want better games. Graphics have now become a marketing ploy. If a game came out today that had some ridiculously realistic graphics, something major, a huge leap in fidelity we haven't seen in years, lots of people would talk about it. But if the game itself wasn't fun or engaging, it would be forgotten the second other games catch up with their graphics. Fallout New Vegas is ugly by today's standards, but millions of people still play, talk, and make YouTube videos about it, because at its core, it's remarkably immersive and fun. What people want is fun games. Games that you don't need a PC the price of a car to run at a stable frame rate. Obviously, there is some part of the human mind that has this innate desire to recreate reality, to make our own universe. And that's been a major part of every art form since the beginning of humanity. Making breathtakingly realistic graphics is undoubtedly an art form like any other, and it takes an insane amount of effort from so many talented and hardworking people. And it should without a doubt be appreciated. But graphics alone do not make the game. Beyond the encroachment of technical plateaus, the industry has become corrupted. Gone are the days of individualistic, coordinated dev teams making something they are passionate about. Now the work is outsourced to teams across the globe that sometimes don't even understand the greater scope of what they're working on. Obviously, there are still great examples of games coming out today that are both successful and well-made, such as Baldur's Gate 3 and Kingdom Come: Deliverance 2, but these are not AAA games. Both of the most well-made and well-received RPGs in recent memory have been made by AA indie studios. And this isn't to say that big-budget games can't be great, but the modern AAA industry is built on an unsustainable model. The cost of developing these massive games has skyrocketed, and publishers have prioritized shareholder profits over creative risks. That's why so many of today's biggest releases feel safe, repetitive, or outright unfinished. The focus isn't on creating a unique artistic experience, on keeping players engaged just enough to milk them out for every penny. Look at the way major publishers push out live service games that crumble within a year. Anthem, Babylon's Fall, Marvel's Avengers, all games that had potential but were designed around engagement metrics and battle passes rather than fun. There's a reason why single-player games have seen such a resurgence despite publishers swearing for years that single-player is dead. People don't want to be endlessly strung along. They want complete, meaningful experiences. And this problem isn't just limited to monetization. The sheer scale of modern game development means that many studios have lost their creative soul. When you have 15 different studios working on a single game, all under crushing deadlines, you lose cohesion, you lose direction. You end up with a product that feels focus-tested to death, a game made by a committee rather than a group of artists. Compare that to something like Dark Souls, a game that was famously difficult to pitch but became one of the most influential titles of the modern era. Would a game like Dark Souls even get made today in the AAA industry? Or would it be rejected for not having enough mass appeal, for being too risky, too niche? This is why smaller studios are leading the charge in innovation. Larian took a risk with Baldur's Gate 3, betting on a hardcore RPG in an era where publishers have been dumbing down their games for wider audiences. Kingdom Come: Deliverance, despite being a rough and ambitious game, offered an experience that no other RPG did at the time. These games weren't designed around microtransactions or engagement farming. They were designed with love and care by people who actually wanted to make something meaningful. The irony is that despite all the talk about technological plateaus, it isn't the limits of hardware that's holding gaming back. It's the industry itself. The industry has plateaued not because we can't make better games, but because the people in charge of making them have stopped taking risks. And yet, despite all this, gaming still thrives. Because no matter how much the AAA side of the industry fumbles, no matter how many cash grabs get shoved into digital storefronts, there will always be people out there making great games. And as long as there are developers who care about the medium and players who care about experiencing something unique, gaming will never truly stagnate. But man, imagine if we had both. Imagine if we had AAA budgets combined with the passion of indie developers. Imagine if the biggest studios in the world prioritized creativity over quarterly earnings. Maybe then we'd stop plateauing. There are a lot of other things that people attribute to the downfall of AAA gaming. Let's keep that door closed. But the reality is, things are changing. Rapidly. And as nice as it is to look back fondly on games that we all loved and try to compare it to the modern disasters we see today, there is only so much we can do. Until AAA studios see that deep and well-crafted single-player games still have a market, we will only continue to see this garbage. I know I've brought this up so many times already, but Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 and Baldur's Gate 3 give me some hope that there is a new golden era of gaming on the horizon. Obsidian just released Avowed, and they also have Outer Worlds 2 coming this year. So I'll be interested to see if the same studio that made New Vegas can make another outstanding RPG. But the thing is, this Obsidian isn't really the same studio that made New Vegas. Sure, it has the same name, but almost every developer that worked there in 2010 is now long gone. And the studio was recently purchased by Microsoft. So again, even Obsidian has fallen under the conglomerate of BlackRock and Vanguard. I've worked at a small family company that got bought out by a bigger corporation, and before the buyout we were told over and over again that nothing would change. But within a week of the buyout, there was lots of changes. And none of the employees were happy with them. These sorts of buyouts are inevitable for some companies, but to see almost every game company slowly get swallowed into the black hole of one massive corporation is saddening. We're seeing a lack of variety and innovation, and studios are leeching onto the last bit of hope, nostalgia, and hype that they can muster from consumers. But on a positive note, New Vegas is good, and after playing a game like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, I think it's finally starting to show its age. Most importantly, New Vegas captures the Fallout vibe that all of us would love to see revitalized in the upcoming season of the Fallout show, and even possibly in a future Fallout game. I know that Fallout 4 and 76 have sort of recanonicalized the art direction and tone, but if they've changed it before, they can do it again. There are fan projects like Fallout 4 New Vegas and Fallout London that go to show just how passionate the fans of the series are, and how badly they want a new entry in the series that holds true to what made them fall in love with the franchise in the first place. This is something that executives are looking past, and it's hard to blame them. If thoughtful, well-crafted, and expensive games made more money for the company, that's what they'd push for. But they don't give half of a shit if people hate a game, because it still makes more money. Activision's stock price continues to soar, despite them continuing to pump out hot microtransaction-filled garbage. It doesn't matter if the games are good, it just matters that it sells better than the last release. For a long time, Bethesda games had a reputation of being buggy, almost unplayably buggy at times. But despite this, people would always fall in love with the worlds that they crafted. But with the release of 76 and Starfield, not only were they incredibly buggy, but at their core, they were bad games. Bethesda has taken a significant turn for the worst, and if they don't revitalize their reputation with Elder Scrolls 6, we may never see another Fallout game from them again. And that could be the best thing for the franchise in a long time.
Between love and hate, it's a thin line between love and hate. It's 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm just getting in. I knock on the door, a voice sweet and low says, "Who is it?" She opened up the door and let me in. Never once do she say, "Where have you been?" She said, "You hungry? Are you hungry, honey? Did you eat? Yeah.